Hello, everybody. Welcome to this presentation. My name is Darya Haitoglou, and I'm going to be your host for today's workshop on Virginia Satir's Parts Party and internal family systems. How to integrate, and if you're working with the clients, or even if for your own personal need or curiosity, I invite you to stay open-minded and maybe jot some ideas, or if you're learning, if you are studying for yourself, that's also going to be quite helpful to know how to combine, but also to understand these two tools that are very helpful and they are research-based. So let me share with you my screen, and hopefully you can see the slides. Okay. So Satir's Parts Party and IFS. Parts Party. First of all, what is Parts Party and what is this technique that was developed by Virginia Satir, who was the mother of family therapy, so-called. Parts Party involves working with different parts of a person's personality in a group therapy setting. Each part represents a different aspect of the individual's psyche or individual's sort of wholeness. And the goal of the Parts Party is to integrate these parts into a cohesive whole, WH. This process involves identifying and exploring each part, including its emotions, beliefs, motivations, and then working to understand how it fits into the individual's overall personality structure. And a lot of the time, this kind of work is developed throughout therapy, but also could be a standalone practice for people who struggle with inner conflict, for example, or they have their parts, some parts of them that they do not accept, or they find it very hard to live with, or maybe there are conflicts in their marriage or in their partnership, in their relationships, and they've tried different tools and different therapies and still not working. Parts Party can be done on an individual level, but also as a couple and as a group. Some wonderful exercises. We also do at our retreats and workshops, and Virginia gave us this legacy that we embraced in systemic work. So let me just give you a little snippet of step-by-step Parts Party instructions, how to do it. If you've never done that, you can of course read some books, but here it is in brief. So kind of a little protocol. So introduction first. You begin by introducing the concept of Parts Party to the group. You explain that this exercise is designed to help individuals explore the different parts of themselves and gain insight into how these parts interact with each other. The second part, the second step is invitation. So you invite each participant to identify a part of themselves that they would like to explore during the Parts Party. You encourage them to choose a part that feels strong or that is causing conflict in their lives. Step 3, externalization. Ask each participant to give a name, shape, and sound to their part. This helps to externalize the part and create a sense of separation from it. 4, dialogue. Facilitate a dialogue between the different parts in the group. Encourage each participant to speak as their part and to interact with the other parts. Use role play, improvisation, or any other techniques to help bring the parts to life. Step 5, exploration. As the dialogue unfolds, encourage participants to explore the underlying emotions, beliefs, and motivations of their parts. Use open-ended questions to help them gain insight into the different aspects of their personalities. And step 6, integration. Finally, facilitate the process of integration where participants bring their parts back together into a cohesive whole. encourage them to find ways to honor and integrate all parts of themselves, even the ones they may be causing conflict. So in a way, a lot of the time, party is done in a group setting where people represent different parts of the star, we call it, the persons or the client. And when people represent these parts, they may dress up like these parts, they may have different props or different objects that they could carry, even the names that can be written of those parts. And often we ask the star to choose 5 or 7 personalities of people, alive or dead, that are famous, that other people know about. 5 or 7 people who they love, who they really inspired by or adore, and 5 or 7 who they really despise or hate or they can't stand. And as they choose these personalities then have, of course, their adjectives or character traits, and the star chooses one character trait for each personality. And guess what? These personalities are, in a way, a projected parts of the very person, of the client, of the star, because what we don't like in other people, and that was very clever by Virginia that she picked it up, what we love and we don't love in other people, what triggers us, what inspires us, we also have these parts inside us. We may name them differently. We may not have them called, the famous movie characters or personalities or maybe history figures, but we have some similarities. And it's very interesting how when we write, for example, those parts and we create, in a way, a projected situation like a constellation, we start noticing how these parts interact within us. So that's a very interesting change of perspective. So let me give you a case of Samantha as an example. Samantha is a young woman who struggles with anxiety and self-doubt. She attends a parts party workshop to explore her inner world and gain insight into her struggles. During the workshop, she identifies a part of herself that she calls the perfectionist, which is responsible for her constant self-criticism and high expectations. As Samantha interacts with the other participants' parts, she begins to gain insight into the underlying beliefs and emotions of her perfectionist. She realizes that this part is driven by a fear of failure and a need for validation. She also discovers that her perfectionist is in conflict with another part of herself, the inner critic, which constantly undermines her confidence. Through the process of exploration and dialogue, Samantha begins to develop a deeper understanding of herself and her inner conflicts. She learns to recognize and honor the different parts of herself, including the perfectionist and the inner critic. She also discovers ways to integrate these parts into a cohesive whole, allowing her to move forward with greater self-awareness and self-compassion. Okay. Now, moving on to the internal family systems, IFS. It is a type of therapy that helps individuals access and heal the different parts of themselves. It posits that people have various personalities or parts within themselves that can have conflicting beliefs, emotions, and behaviors. IFS views these parts as a natural and necessary aspect of human experience and seeks to help individuals work with them in a more harmonious and integrated way. The therapy involves identifying and getting to know these parts, understanding their roles and functions, and using techniques such as visualization and mindfulness to help clients access and communicate with them. Through this process, clients can develop a greater sense of self-awareness, self-compassion, and inner peace. Internal family systems actually was created by Dr. Richard Schwarz, who I think was also inspired by Virginia Satir work. Well, he definitely wrote many articles as he looked at both models together, and a lot of the parts party work is very similar to the a lot of IFS work is very similar to the parts party, which is part of the Satir model, it's not full therapy, whereas IFS is the therapy of choice, and it has a lot of science backed up research and studies that support the efficacy of this model. Now, how do we combine the two? Here's the 4 proposed steps, for example: introducing the parts party, identifying parts, understanding each part, and integrate parts. Now, if I look at my steps here, they have a bit more. I don't know if you can see. Okay, I can read it for you. So step 1, introducing the parts party. The first step is to introduce the parts party model to the client. This model is based on Satir's approach to therapy and involves identifying the different parts of the self that may be contributing to the client's issues. It is important to explain that these parts are not necessarily negative or positive, but rather different aspects of the client's personality that have developed over time. The therapist should explain that the goal of the parts party is to identify and explore these different parts in a safe and supportive environment. Step 2, identifying parts. The next step is to identify the different parts of the self that are present in the client. This can be done through a variety of techniques, such as visualization and drawing. The therapist should encourage the client to explore each part and give it a name or label that represents its function or purpose. Step 3, understanding each part. Once the different parts have been identified, the therapist can work with the client to explore the function and purpose of each part. This may involve asking questions about when each part is most active and what triggers its activation. The therapist should also encourage the client to explore any emotions or beliefs associated with each part. Step 4, integrating parts. The final step is to work with the client to integrate the different parts of the self into a more cohesive whole. This may involve helping the client to identify the strengths and positive qualities of each part and finding ways to integrate these into the client's overall sense of self. The therapist should also work with the client to identify any conflicts or negative patterns that may be present between different parts and help the client find ways to resolve these conflicts. So here's an example of a client who may be having a part that is highly critical of themselves and others, which causes them to feel anxious and stressed. Through the parts party model, the therapist can help the client identify this critical part and explore its function and purpose. They may find that this part was developed as a way of protecting themselves from criticism or rejection from others. The therapist can then work with the client to identify the strengths of this part, such as its attention to detail or strong work ethic, for example, and find ways to integrate these strengths into the client's overall sense of self. They may also work with the client to identify any conflict between this critical part and other parts of the self, such as a more compassionate or nurturing part, and help the client find ways to resolve these conflicts. So here's an integration a little bit more detailed way. I call it a protocol of integration. Okay, 7-step protocol. So first is to establish rapport. Begin by establishing a strong therapeutic alliance with the client, building trust and creating a safe environment for the client to explore their inner world. And when I say client, you can also do it with yourself, right? So you can be the therapist and the client for yourself. It also works because the power of our imagination, we can have the adult and the inner child, yeah, that could also be a very powerful synergy. Or it can be that maybe a counselor or inner wise self and the client, or maybe the younger version, the less experienced version. So I think like you're doing this protocol for yourself. As you're listening, you can even apply some of these steps to your inner dialogue. So as you establish rapport, meaning like you get in contact and you try to understand and to connect with that inner part that needs trust, that needs creation of a safe environment for the inner world to be explored. Then you might introduce the IFS and the Satir model to the part that may be young. Sometimes maybe you can just read this to the inner child or the client, the inner client. You can explain that there are two different models, as I'm doing now. And this very interesting thing. When we explain with the tonality of the voice that's calm, it's also a soothing and calming element that can help create the trust and connection of our inner parts. So provide an overview of both models and how they complement each other. Explain that the IFS model is based on the idea that everyone has multiple parts within themselves, and the Satir model focuses on the impact of family systems and communication patterns on individuals. Number 3, assess the client's parts and family dynamics. Use IFS techniques to identify the client's parts and their roles, beliefs, and emotions. Then use Satir techniques to explore how the client's family dynamics and communication patterns might have influenced these parts. Number 4, facilitate communication between parts. Encourage the client to engage in a dialogue between their different parts using IFS techniques such as parts party or two-chair work. And then use Satir techniques to help the client explore how these parts might relate to their family system and communication patterns. Number 5, foster self-leadership. Help the client to identify their self, the core of their being that can provide compassionate guidance and healing for their parts. Use IFS techniques to help the client access their self and Satir techniques to explore how the client's family system and communication patterns might have impacted their ability to connect with their self. Number 6, integrate new insights. Use IFS techniques to help the client integrate new insights and perspectives gained from the work with their parts and self, and Satir techniques to explore how these insights might inform their interactions with their family and others. And finally, step 7, develop a plan to have ongoing healing. Collaborate with the client to develop a plan for ongoing healing, which might include continuing to work with their parts and self, exploring family dynamics and communication patterns, and developing new skills and resources. Okay, so you can have that, you can take a picture of it, you can print it out and have your inner protocol, how you can do it with your inner client or inner child. Become a little, therapist. Okay, so here are 3 examples of Megan, Rena, and Rolf. Megan struggled with anxiety and a fear of abandonment stemming from early childhood experiences. Through the use of IFS and parts parties, the client was able to explore and heal the parts of herself that felt anxious and afraid. During the parts party, the client identified her anxious part and was able to better understand its purpose and message. With the guidance of the therapist, she was then able to access her inner resources and self-compassion to soothe and integrate this part. As a result, Megan reported feeling more at ease and less anxious in her daily life. Rena experienced intense feelings of anger and frustration in her relationships with others, particularly her spouse. Through the use of IFS and the Satir model, Rena was able to explore and understand the parts of herself that held onto these feelings, while also accessing her compassionate self to offer support and healing. The therapist also guided Rena in exploring the underlying needs and fears that may have contributed to the development of this part. As a result, Rena reported feeling more in control of her emotions and better able to communicate her needs and desires to her spouse. And finally, Rolf. Rolf struggled with self-criticism and a sense of not being good enough. Through the use of IFS and parts party, Rolf was able to explore and heal the parts of himself that held onto these beliefs. During the parts party, the client identified his critical part and was able to better understand its origins and purpose. With the guidance of the therapist, he was then able to access his compassionate self and inner resources to offer support and healing to this part. As a result, he felt more, he reported feeling more self acceptance and self love and less criticism. So, these are just examples of how other people use these different but also similar models to access their inner parts and inner resources. And now I would like to invite you to close your eyes if you are not driving, if you feel you can sit for 5 to 7 minutes and close your eyes with your spine hopefully straight but not too strained, connected through your feet to the ground or to the floor. As you close your eyes and relax your body so you can breathe deeper. And as you breathe in, you notice how you breathe in the light energy that comes through the sole of your feet, through the ground from the center of the earth. And as you allow that light, golden, sparkly light, travel through your feet, through your ankles and knees, through your thighs and pelvic bone, and feeling your abdomen, your stomach, your chest, every cell of every organ with beautiful, nurturing, nourishing light. And as you relax your shoulders, you notice how that light is traveling through the arms and fingers. And you can imagine your head is also filling up with that golden light around all the eyes and ears and between, and your mouth, your tongue is relaxed and jaw a little bit open. And you imagine yourself fully relaxed in your chair. And now I would like you to focus on your inner world. Imagine your eyes looking inwards. And as you are noticing different parts of you, invite them all to sit around the table with you. You might notice your parts that are protectors or managers, the parts that have been very active to help you go about your day, to do your daily tasks. You might notice some parts that are vulnerable and maybe they're younger parts. These we call exile, the parts that have been maybe sitting in a corner for some time. They've been protected by other parts. And as you imagine these parts sitting around the table, you can invite all the parts to feel safe, to feel connected to each other, and tell them that they are all valuable, they are all welcome, and they have the place and time when they can speak, when they can play, when they can act, and when they can create partnerships with different parts around the table. Maybe the smaller, younger, exiled parts might find refuge with stronger, wiser, older parts, the parts that are protectors, motherly, wise parts. The doers, the inner critic, the perfectionist parts, these are also firefighters. Just allow them to feel needed and allow them to relax a little bit and sit around the table and observe and listen to other parts who haven't been talking. Maybe there is a small, delicate part, the younger part, been scared or sad or feeling vulnerable or overwhelmed. Just notice who might help this part. Imagine a part stands up and comes to that little part, hugs her, and tells her that I'm here for you. I will protect you. You're with me. Don't worry. Allow that part to feel the warmth and strength and support and trust from the bigger part. And allow that part to connect in a different way, to integrate this little connection, maybe sit at a different part of the table together, small and large parts together. Imagine them taking hands and creating a circle of support, hugging each other. Imagine them playing with each other when they crawl and they hug and they laugh and they just roll on the floor all together. Imagine them laughing, all of them. Imagine them looking into each other's eyes with compassion and love, because all of them are working together. And now I would like you to imagine the part that has no face. It's a beautiful source of energy. It's at the head of the table, and it is the source. It is the self. It is the part that never changes. It is the part that doesn't have pain or suffering. It just is. It's beautiful. It's ever present. It's nurturing. It's like the mother nature. And suddenly all the parts discover the self and they want to feel connected. They want to belong. They want to just be next to that part. And that golden light from the self going to different parts, connecting, reconnecting, and creating a whole beautiful wholeness. And now imagine that party of different parts inside your heart. You can keep them, you can thank them, you can spend some quality time with them as you go about your day. And remember that all these parts create something so beautiful, so much larger than just some of them. They create you. And you are always connected to the self, the source energy. And as you sit in your chair and take a few deep breaths, you find yourself back in your body, maybe moving your fingers or toes and opening your beautiful eyes when you're ready. And I thank you for joining me on this journey. And I allow the parts that need to be integrated to find their place in the beautiful mosaic of our world. Thank you for listening and for being here.